Good morning and welcome to the edition of our excretory system. We had left at the different, where we had seen the urine formation and the different tubules. So I like to just go in a brief at the absorption and secretion patterns of the different tubules, and then we go to the actual presentation regarding the formation of dilute urine and concentrated urine. So in this presentation, I would like you see the different, this is a nephron, structure of the nephron, and it starts from the glomerulus, and then different tubules are there, like the proximal convoluted, distal, loop of Henle, and the collecting duct. Importance is that filtered load is about 180 liters, but we only excrete about 1.5 to 2 liters of urine per day. In different animals and others, there are different concentrating and diluting properties of the tubules which give us the property of urine formation. The different segments of tubules determine the composition, the volume, the resorptive rate, and the secretion of solutes. The tubules control the volume, the osmolality, which is very, very important because we have certain thirst centers, we have different hormones which regulate it, the composition of urine, the osmolality of urine, the pH, and also the pH of the ICF, the ECF compartments, all is determined by the nephrons. We have transport across the different segments like transport from proximal, distal, and convoluted tubules and the collecting duct. Now reabsorption, secretion, the filtered load, and the excretion rate. These definitions you have seen, we have already gone into this beforehand. So if we just say what is filtered load, it is the amount of solute transported across the glomerular membrane per unit time. It is equal to glomerular filtrate into the plasma concentration. The excretion rate is the amount of substance that appears in the urine per unit time. So now this is a very nice animated diagram showing the different processes which are occurring in the nephrons. You can see the blood and protein which are being filtered at the glomerulus. Then you can see just everything is being added here. Then you can see the osmosis, the proximal tubule, mostly the absorptive of the solute and the water. Then the concentration of the solute increases because the descending limb is highly permeable to water. Then there are different pumps in the ascending limb. There is a thick segment and the thin segment, and these solutes are pumped back like the sodium, potassium, chloride. They are pumped from the thin segments. Then you have the loop of, that is the ascending limb. Here again the solutes, they come out. Then you have the distal tubule. You have certain water channels which are activated by ADH. And then again there is the cortical collecting duct and the medullary collecting duct, which will be seen here. And then ultimately the urine formation will be there. Either you require to have a dilute urine or a concentrated urine. It depends on the osmolality in the plasma and also of the solute load in different conditions which appear in the body. So these are the different parts of the nephrons. And then there is proximal tubule. Main function is resorption of 75 to 80% of water and different solutes like sodium, chloride, bicarbonates, potassium, calcium, magnesium, and phosphates. And most important is the glucose, because there are transporters for glucose in this segment. Then results in isoosmotic solution. The osmolality will be about 300 as of the plasma. Then next we go to the different transport mechanisms like the sodium ATPase, in the basolateral membrane, there are tight junctions. So all this causes absorption of glucose, amino acids, and the different ions along with water. Then loop of Henle, there are three parts, that is descending limb, then ascending limb, thin and thick segment. It begins in the cortex, receiving urine from the proximal convoluted tubule, enters into medulla, and then returns to the cortex to empty into the distal convoluted tubule. Its role is to concentrate the salt in the interstitium, which is the tissue surrounding the different loops of Henle. Now, it is permeable to water and salt, and thus only indirectly contributes to concentration of the interstitium. Now, as the filtrate, which goes deeper, the hypertonic interstitium of the renal medulla, the water will flow freely out of this descending limb by osmosis until the tonicity of the filtrate and the interstitium this is called as osmotic equilibrium, which again results in hypertonic solution in the tubule, which will go in details later on. Then the ascending segment. The most important part of it is it's impermeable to water. It is permeable to the salt solutions, and therefore generating a hypertonic interstitium, which is very, very important for countercurrent mechanism, which is multiplier system and exchanger system, which results in a hypotonic solution in the tubule, because water cannot move out, only the solutes are moving out. So due to that, the solute becomes hypotonic. This hypotonic filtrate is then passed to the distal tubule. The distal tubule, again, it is having reabsorption of water and sodium. There is secretion of renin, the renin-angiotensin mechanism at the macula densa, which we have already covered. Now it results in an isoosmotic solution. So after traveling the length of the distal tubule, only 3% of the water remains, and the remaining salt content is usually negligible. So most of the water in the glomerular filtrate enters the convoluted tubule and the collecting duct by the process of osmosis. Then the distal tubule, we continue. There is the different hormones. They act on it like the parathyroid, which causes reabsorption of calcium. Aldosterone present, which absorbs more. Potassium is excreted and sodium is reabsorbed. And ANP, which causes the distal convoluted tubule to excrete more of sodium, which is important during hypertension. In addition, the tubule also secretes hydrogen ion and ammonium to regulate the pH. So the acid-base balance and all occurs in this tubule. The collecting duct, there is results in hypertonic solution because it is more permeable to water under the influence of ADH. There are ADH receptors which are present, and that causes the stimulation of aquaporins. Aquaporins are usually inside the cytoplasm of the cell, but whenever there is ADH, that will stimulate the aquaporins to come to the surface of the cell and form water channels, which there are different types of aquaporins which are there and which causes increased absorption of water. So your 10 distal tubule, they continue as the medullary pyramids, about 2,700 nephron, and final adjustment of the urine, either dilute or concentrated, will occur in this segment of the nephron. So it results in a hypertonic solution. There are two types of the collecting, the cortical collecting duct and the medullary collecting duct. So the cortical collecting duct, which begins in the renal cortex and extends into the medulla and forms the medullary collecting duct. This medullary collecting duct, which is very important for maintaining the osmolality in the medullary interstitium, that is hyperosmotic medullary interstitium, which is important for concentrating the urine because a lot of water will be lost, and this will be then again taken up by the vasa recti, and so the concentration of sodium will be more in this part of the nephron. And it occurs in the presence of ADH. When we want to have a dilute urine, the ADH level will decrease, and when you want to have a concentrated urine, the ADH, that is antidiuretic hormone, will increase, so that lot of water will be absorbed and we have a concentrated urine. Now there are different solutes which gives the concentrating ability to the kidney. It is not only sodium, chloride, and also certain ions like urea. So urea cycle will also go on. At one end, the urea goes inside the tubule, and at the other end, it comes out. This recirculation of urea, which will I explain later, will lead to the increased hyperosmolality in the medullary interstitium. Now, the levels of ADH will determine whether urine is concentrated or diluted. Now, dehydration results in increase in ADH, while water sufficiency results in low ADH, allowing for a dilute urine. Now, lower portions of the collecting ducts are also permeable to urea and in the presence of ADH. ADH causes activation of the passive channels for urea, that is UT1 and UT3, and this will cause the absorption of urea. The total load of urea which is given to the nephron, about 50% is absorbed and 50% is passed in the urine. It all will depend on your diet, how much proteins you are taken, how much urea is being made, and accordingly the urea will be present in your urine. So in the kidney, some of it enters in the medulla, thus maintaining its high concentration gradient. Even urea is very important for maintaining a hyperosmolar interstitium. Urine leaves the collecting duct through the renal papillae, emptying into the renal calyces, the renal pelvis, and finally into the bladder via the ureters. So this is the whole passage of urine. Because it has a different embryonic origin, rest of the nephron, where the collecting duct is from endoderm, while the nephron is from the mesoderm, the collecting duct is usually not considered a part of the nephron proper. Now, different transportation techniques, that is passive transport, active transport, passive co-transport like chloride, glucose, amino acids, and you have the anti-transport like the sodium inside, hydrogen or calcium outside, and active transport of the different active transport pumps are there for the substances in the nephrons. So we have the glucose transport, proteins, which is ATP dependent, and sodium glucose co-transporters. Then you have the kidney excrete variety of waste products like urea, uric acid, non-protein nitrogenous waste products, creatinine. So urea is filtered in glomerulus apparatus, increase urea concentration in proximal tubule because of reabsorption of water, reabsorption of urea later in the proximal tubule, back into the loop of Henle, helps to keep the hypertonic interstitium. Again, it is moved out through the urea channels in the collecting duct. So this is ultimately the urea cyclical response in the nephron. So sodium filtered load is 575 to 580. PCT about 80% is absorbed. In a loop of Henle, 20%. 15% in DCT. In the collecting duct, it is 2.2 to 3%. So in DCT and CT, 75% absorption is by chloride-driven sodium transport, and 25% is by the sodium-potassium exchanger and sodium-hydrogen exchanger. These all mechanisms, we had done it in the last series of my lectures. So we have sodium-potassium pump on the basolateral side, and luminal side, you have the sodium-potassium ATPase pump on the basolateral side by ultrafiltration into the capillaries by the bulk flow mechanism. So this is the first part of the proximal tubule. You can see the sodium absorption, sodium-potassium co-transporter. Then you have the sodium-glucose co-transporters, and then you have the sodium-hydrogen counter-transport. We can see the tubular fluid, the blood, and the carbonic anhydrase mechanism for generation of H+. The second half, again the sodium absorption, sodium and chloride through the paracellular pathways, then sodium-hydrogen counter-transport, and along with chloride, it is absorbed, and this chloride will again leads to absorption of potassium and chloride, and sodium absorption ultimately leads to the absorption of different solutes. Reabsorption of SCO3, we have already done. That is about, in PCT 90%, and in DCT and CT about 10 to 15% by the exchange of sodium with potassium or hydrogen. So this is the mechanism of HCO3. Now you can see that CO2 enters the cell, CO2 plus H2O, that be formation of H2CO3, sodium, potassium, ATPase. The sodium goes outside in the renal interstitium and potassium comes inside. On one side, on the tubular luminal side, sodium comes inside, hydrogen goes outside. Now this forms the SCO3 which is present in the tubular lumen. It will form H plus and H2CO, the ultimately formation of H2CO3 and then dissipates into H2O plus CO2. So this mechanism is going on in the presence of carbonic anhydrous. So resorption of glucose, that is facilitated diffusion. Energy is provided by active transport of sodium. So this is a typical glucose reabsorption, this SGLT2 and GLUT2. At the tubular side, you have the SGLT2 receptors along with sodium co-transport, and then glucose moves to the interstitium through the GLUT2, and that is then ultimately is absorbed in the blood. So these are the mechanisms in the different segments of the tubes. The transport maximum and the filtered load of glucose is 125 milligram and the transport maximum is about 320 milligrams per minute. So when increase in GFR or increase in plasma glucose, it increases the filtered loads and glucose will start appearing in urine, which is in diabetes, mellitus and certain other disorders. Now renal threshold for glucose, it is about 200, 180 to 200. So above 200, some of the glucose will appear in urine. It still does not require to reach 320. So why is so? Because all the nephron, they have a different transport maximum. So when we take average of all, it comes out to be 180 to 200. And that is all due to splay mechanism. Absorption of water in PCT 75 to 80%. In the loop of Henle 5 to 10% from the descending limb, because ascending limb is impermeable to water. Now in the distal convoluted tubule, again in the presence of ADH, about 5 to 8% passively, and in terminal part about 10 to 12% under the influence of ADH. So very important, impermeability of water, permeability to water in different segments. All these mechanisms lead us to the dilution and concentrating mechanisms of the nephrons. Then obligatory reabsorption of water, because if we take certain solutes, it is secondary to active absorption of sodium, and facultative reabsorption is reabsorption of water in terminal tubules under the influence of ADH. So obligatory means it is the absorption of water along with sodium absorption. So it does always occur. But facultative resorption, you require ADH. And if there are different thirst centers, the hypothalamus, the posterior pituitary, and the osmolality in the ECF, ICF, all will determine this facultative reabsorption of water. Now, obligatory urine volume. How much urine you should pass per day to get rid of the different excess of solutes? So that is about 500 ml. That is a minimum requirement. In certain animals like the kangaroo rats and certain mouse living in the desert, they have a very high concentrating mechanism and they can give us osmolality up to 10,000. In our urine, we can get osmolality up to 1200 to 1400, but here it will be up to 10,000. So they can stay in these desert conditions for so long, even without drinking water for a long time. Even about the camels, they have a long loop of Henle. The medullary interstitium is also thick. The thickness of the medulla is more. All this give us the idea about the concentrating mechanism of the kidneys in the different species. Potassium transport, it is completely filtered and this is the only solute which has both secretion as well as reabsorption. Both processes are taking place. The secretion is both active and passive by the principal cells in the late DCT and CT and under the influence of the hormone, that is aldosterone. Resorption of chloride is directly proportional to resorption of water and indirectly proportional to the absorption of SCO3. So this is the potassium absorption in the proximal tubules along with sodium, that is counter transport, along with chloride co-transport, and through the intercellular spaces also. This is this potassium secretion in distal tubule and the collecting duct. It is a secretory process. And the three mechanisms are going on. Sodium-potassium ATPase, it comes from the interstitium into the cell, and then the permeability, electrochemical gradient is created, which causes high permeability of sodium, and high permeability of potassium to the tubular lumen. H plus secretion through the intercalated cells of late DCT, about 10%, and H plus secretion occurs throughout the nephrons except the descending limb of loop of Henle. And absorption of SCO3 and K plus by an active hydrogen ATPase mechanism. So maximum of it, this is active secretion in the PCT, that is about 85%. Secretion of urea, it is passively reabsorbed from the tubules of the renal medulla. In the inner medullary collecting duct, the passive urea absorption is facilitated by specific urea transporters like UT1, UT3. Urea transporter is facilitated by ADH. So when excess of ADH, the reabsorption will increase. Only 50% of urea is reabsorbed and 50% goes off in the urine. It all depends on the nitrogen mechanism because it's a waste product from the nitrogen mechanism, and urea which is produced in the body depends on your protein diet. If you have a lot of urea, the concentrating ability of the kidney will more. So if the sodium excretion is decreased, still urea can manage the interstitial osmolality and the concentrated urine can be excreted because of the presence of urea. So urea is also very important. So sodium is important, urea is important, the other solutes are important, and the most important is also ADH. So these hormones are important for the concentrating and diluting abilities of the kidney. Now applied, we have a condition that is known as uremia, which develops more than 75% of the nephrons are damaged, tubulonephritis, nephrotic syndrome, and so many acute renal failures. In this condition, there is a lot of urea accumulation because the excretion of urea becomes less. So in that condition, there will be accumulation of nitrogenous waste products in the blood. There will be metabolic acidosis and hyperkalemia. Ultimately, if the urea level still rises, that is 40 milligram is the level. If it increases more than that, then it leads to uremic coma. Now we go to the formation of dilute urine. So this is a process of water, diuresis. Now you can see the vasa recti as well as the nephron. So in this slide, you can see that at the one, where the one mark is there, the filtration of the plasma osmolality will be about 300 milliosmoles. Now the descending limb, you can see, that is first is the proximal convoluted tubule. In that, maximum of the water and the solutes will be absorbed. And as we go lower down, lot of water also will be reabsorbed because highly permeable to water. Then as we go still down, you can see at the bend of the loop of Henle, the osmolality will be more. And as it is impermeable, the ascending limb is impermeable, only the solutes are coming out. So the tubules, the urine, the urine in the tubules will be highly highly diluted. So again, you can see in the fourth part, more of the sodium chloride and all is coming out. In fifth part, again the sodium chloride and all. So ultimately, a dilute urine is being produced. So see the osmolality, 300 Again it becomes 300, still go down, it becomes 400 in the interstitium, it becomes 500 and 600. The medullary interstitium is less hyperosmotic, and now there is no ADH. You can see here there is no ADH. As there is no ADH, no water will be absorbed. This is called as water diuresis. ADH is required for antidiuresis. Here it is required for diuresis. So for diuresis, ADH will not be there. The urea absorption will also decrease, and this urea will not be reabsorbed, and it will be taken back in the urine. Maximum of it will be excreted in urine. So you can see the formation again in this sodium chloride, water, all is absorbed. It becomes 300 milliosmoles. Water is again absorbed from the ascending limb. So the medullary interstitium becomes 600 milliosmol at the tip. It becomes same as the loop of Henle because there is osmolar gradient, which is almost same. That leads to absorption of NaCl under the influence of the active pumping of sodium chloride from the thick segment of the descending limb. So ultimately the concentration of the water will increase, and it is impermeable to water. And as we go up, it becomes 100. The osmolality will just become 100. Again, the NaCl will come out of the cortical collecting duct, and as we move further, from the cortex to the medulla, there is no ADH here. So ADH is not here. So in those conditions, more of the dilute urine will be formed. You see the osmolality, it is 100, then it becomes 70. And as we go to the medullary collecting duct and ultimately the final phases of urine formation, it will still become 50. So very, very dilute urine will be produced. This is important when there is high water load is increased. It is very important, there will be no ADH secretion, and as in the case of increased water in the body, in hypertensive conditions, the renin-angiotensin mechanism will come into play, and all this will lead to water diuresis. In so many conditions where water diuresis is required. So this is a mechanism of formation of a dilute urine. Then we have a concentrating part of the tubules. So for that, we have this two solute model. One is sodium and the other is urea. So in the proximal tubule, filtrate volume decreases, but its osmolality remains the same. The countercurrent multiplier system involving the loop of Henle, it maintains a high salt concentration in the kidney. For requirement of the interstitium, for the requirement of a concentrated urine, we require high levels of ADH. We require hyperosmotic medullary interstitium. There are various mechanisms for maintaining this for medullary hyperosmotic interstitium. This system, there are two. One is countercurrent multiplier system, and we have a countercurrent exchange system which occurs in the vasa recti. Now this countercurrent multiplier system allows the vasa recti to supply the kidney with nutrition. So nutrition is required, but to certain extent, without interfering with the osmolarity gradient. Considerable energy is also required to maintain the osmotic gradient between the medulla and the cortex. Because for the solutes, you require these different pumps, and for the pumps, you require the energy, that is ATP. Solute gradients and water conservation. Now the mammalian kidney's ability to conserve water is a key terrestrial adaptations. As I told you about the kangaroo rat and the other desert animals, they have long loop of Henle, and this concentrating abilities vary. There are different uricotelic animals, amyotelic animals, and uricosuric animals. So accordingly, their waste products will change. In some animals, it is the uric acid which is produced more in the urine. In some animals, urea is excreted, and in some animals, ammonia, aminotelic animals. So hypertonic, hyperosmotic urine can be produced only because considerable energy is expended for the transport mechanisms. The two primary solutes are NaCl and urea. So they are all important for the concentrating mechanisms in the kidney. Now the collecting duct conducts the infiltrate through the osmolality gradient, and more water will then exit the filtrate by osmosis. If this medullary, interstitium has more concentration of the solute, more water will be pulled, and ultimately this will increase the osmolality in the tubule, which is required for a concentrated urine. Urea diffuses out of the collecting duct under influence of ADH, and it also transverses the inner medulla. Urea and NaCl form the osmotic gradient and enables the kidney to produce urine that is hyperosmotic to blood. This is very, very important. So you can see in the figure, there are different transport mechanisms. You can see in the first part, see the osmolality is 300. Then as we go down, water is coming out along with the solutes. So you can see the osmolality is increasing. It is 400, then it becomes, so you can see the osmolality increasing. It becomes 900. This is the final one, okay? Then 1200, again in the thick and thin segment, they're impermeable to water. So you can see NaCl passive diffusion, active diffusion through the different pump mechanism, and you can see the osmolality will start decreasing. It becomes 400, 200 as we go towards the cortex. So in outer medulla, the osmolality decreases, and as we go to the cortex, it becomes still less. It becomes 100 and all. So ultimately, the osmolality of interstitial fluid, you can see it becomes 300, 400, 600. Ultimately, at the medullary interstitium, it is 1200. So this, now as it becomes 1200, there will be lot of fluid moving out of this part, and ultimately this fluid is conserved and taken up by the vasa recti. So this medullary gradient is very important to be produced so that lot of water will be absorbed under the influence of ADH, and this is important for concentrating the urine. So see this collecting duct, water is coming out, NaCl to some extent, and urea and water. This is very important for the diffusion of urea and water, which leads to the hyperosmotic medullary interstitium. This water is then picked up by the vasa recti, and this is taken up in the body. So water conservation is also important, very important when we go in the very hot climate, where water conservation has to be very important. So this is the same mechanism, a different diagram. You can see this is antidiuresis because ADH is present, and antidiuresis. So countercurrent mechanism, it is in the countercurrent multiplier system and countercurrent exchanger system in the vasa recti. We have two principal factors, hyperosmolar, osmotic gradient, that is medullary interstitium of the kidney, and antidiuretic hormone. Now this countercurrent exchange which is occur in the vasa recti, you can see a model of it. A substance to be exchanged moves across a permeable barrier in the direction from greater to the lesser concentration. This creates a countercurrent multiplier effect. Next is the countercurrent exchange mechanism. You can see in the webfoot of the ducks and birds. It's mostly found throughout nature. The birds reduce heat loss. So in one end of the capillary, there will be heating, and in the other end, there will be cooling, so that heat loss will not be there, and maintains the normal heat loss will not be there, and this is important in very cold climates, so that body will conserve heat. So countercurrent, in loop of Henle is responsible for countercurrent multiplier system, and vasa recti for countercurrent exchange system. So these are the cortical nephron, and you can see the medullary nephron. So see the long loop of Henle. It is very, very important, which I told you beforehand. So this is the countercurrent multiplier. In the part 1, 300 milliosmoles in the proximal limb. Solutes are also passing along with water, so osmolality is not changing. So the medullary interstitium will have the same osmolality. Now as we go further, more of the solutes will be passing and less, and ultimately you can see the osmolality increasing, and the medullary interstitium gradient is increasing, that is about 200. So you can see that it becomes 200, and here it is 400. So this mechanism 1, 2, 3, 4. So due to this, there will be multiplying effect of the medullary interstitium. The osmolality changes. That is from 300, it has changed to 400. Then again it changes to about 500 because I told you the mechanisms that is impermeable to water but permeable to the solute. So as the thin segment and the thick segment, there will be increased permeability to solutes, but it is not permeable to water. So that leads to increased solute diffusion in the interstitium along with the urea also. I'll show you the urea cycle. So ultimately that will lead to the multiplying effect of the hyperosmolar interstitium. You can see it becomes 500. This repeated steps from 4 to 6 increase in the osmolality increases to about 1200. So 1200 is the maximum, 12 to 1400 they say, but 1200 is the maximum. You can see at the tip the osmolality is 1200. So the fluid coming from the proximal tubule, it adds to the solute load in the distal convoluted tubule. It is impermeable to water, and ADH is there, so it will lead to more of the solute which is absorbed, that leads to hyperosmolality of the medullary interstitium. This is the recirculation of urea. See, urea load is 4.5, 100%. As we go to the outer medulla, it is again same 50% remaining. Now inner medulla, you can see the urea concentration increases because of addition of urea which is being absorbed at the medullary collecting duct. So from medullary collecting duct, it is again absorbed in the proximal segment. So this cycle of urea adds to the hyperosmolality of the medullary interstitium. This is called as recirculation of urea. This is the countercurrent exchange. Now the water which is being absorbed at one end, see at the one end of the vasa recti, the solutes will be absorbed from the interstitium. If these solutes they are absorbed, they go back out of the kidneys, then there will be solute loss and the hyperosmotic medullary interstitium will be, the solute will be lost. So minimize the loss, we have the exchange mechanism. In exchange mechanism, the solute is absorbed at one end and it is again coming out of the vasa recti at the other end of the capillary. So that the interstitium, the solute loss will not be there and the osmolality will be maintained. And this osmolality is very important for movement of the fluid from the cortical collecting duct. So this vasa recti also plays important role in maintaining the osmolar gradient and medullary interstitial hyperosmolality. This is again the countercurrent exchange system. We have already discussed. You can see that multiplication of the effect. See the osmolality increasing from 300, it is becoming 600 up to 1200, and you have the urea cycle. At one end, the urea has been absorbed in the cortical duct under the influence of ADH along with water, but then this will lead to urea loss. So this urea will again recirculate and come to the proximal part, and that's the descending limb. Again, it will be reabsorbed. So this urea cycle is very important for the hyperosmolar medullary interstitium. So this is the countercurrent system. So this is about the vasa recti. The medullary blood flow is low. This is very important. It's a very slow system, a very long vasa recti. So the minimizing the solute loss, descending limb absorbs sodium chloride and urea, but water is absorbed into the interstitium. The ascending limb returns the solute, so no solute loss will be there. This is very, very important for maintaining the hyperosmolality. So last part, that is mechanism. Again, we go into the mechanism, we revise it. One is active transport of sodium and co-transport of other end out of the thick portion of the ascending limb of the loop of Henle. Active transport of ions from the collecting duct. Then facilitated diffusion of urea and the urea cycle in the inner collecting medullary duct, and diffusion of small amount of water from the medullary tubules. These all have effect on the medullary hyperosmolality. So in the PCT, it is permeable to water, so solutes. So from the first part, only the solutes and water will go, osmolality will be same. Now in the loop of Henle descending part, the concentrating segment, it is permeable to water, so the concentration increases. At the tip, it becomes 1200. Then the ascending limb is the diluting segment. This limb is impermeable to water and permeable to NaCl. Thick segment is impermeable to water, so the transport of NaCl by the active pump mechanism. In the DCT, distal convoluted tubule, permeable to water only under the presence of ADH and the solutes. Now, in the collecting duct, which is permeable to water, so the concentration of urea increases when the fluid enters into the medullary portion of the tubule. The medullary portion of the collecting duct, it's a passive diffusion of urea, and water increases the medullary osmolality. So this is the diagram for the concentration of urine, which we have already seen. The hormone required one is aldosterone, which are important. The major part of it will be taught in the endocrine system. So main part of it is acts at the distal nephron to increase absorption of sodium and chloride and secretion of potassium and hydrogen ions. So this is the function of it. Sodium chloride reabsorption causes passive retention of water. Then ADH we have already seen. ADH works under the influence of osmoreceptors which are present in the anterior part of the hypothalamus, and then they have an effect on the posterior pituitary to secrete ADH. This ADH will be going to the kidney and it upregulates water channels. They are called as aquaporins on the collecting duct, and this leads to increased water absorption and decrease in sodium concentration by the dilution. So just we go to certain cases. A 50-year-old maid is seen for a routine physical examination, is feeling more tired, thirst, hunger increases, and he has to go to a bathroom for urination at night. The lab measured a random blood sugar of 350. So here what do we suggest? It is usually a case of diabetes, and his urine albumin and creatinine is about 40 milligram. So it's a diabetes type 2 adult onset. So it's a diabetes mellitus. Saturation of glucose transporters are all saturated, and so the glucose is passed in urine. And that along with glucose, water is also taken out, so it leads to osmotic diuresis. So chronic hyperglycemia leads to microvascular damages, eye changes, kidney changes. Ultimately, that leads to resulting in microalbuminemia and glomerular capillary wall damage. A case 2, here a 39-year-old male with AIDS was admitted with nausea, vomiting, abdominal pain, lightheadedness on standing. During hospitalization, the patient developed hypotonic polyuria with urine volumes of 9 liters. So the serum sodium was 149, usually more, and urine osmolality was 71 to 88. So this is a condition of this is a condition which we say is the SIADH. The ADH level is less. So the serum osmolality is 306, urine osmolality is 102, and urine ADH is undetectable. So it's a syndrome of inappropriate ADH secretion. The MR images showing changes in the posterior pituitary. So ADH, there is a central type of ADH problem, central type of ADH decrease in response to treatment, and what we give desmopressin. About 2 to 3 liters urine volume will decrease. The patient later died of bowel perforation. So autopsy showed the damage to the posterior pituitary which was caused by cytomegalovirus infection. Diabetes insipidus, it is also called. Inability to concentrate urine, central and nephrogenic. Its damage to the posterior pituitary results in inadequate ADH production. Treatment is exogenous ADH, and you have nephrogenic type, well, kidney unresponsive to ADH, which can be hereditary or acquired. And serum ADH is high in nephrogenic, yes, serum ADH is less in central. This is last case, 61-year-old male presented with confusion and seizures 2 days after starting a new medication like citalopram. Sodium level was 124, osmolality 263, urine sodium was 141, urine osmolality was 400. The output was less than 1 liter. The patient's serum sodium gradually normalized after the medication was discontinued. So this is called as syndrome of inappropriate antidiuretic hormone. Open channels in the collecting duct led to excessive water reabsorption and dilutional hyponatremia, which is caused by brain injury. And certain tumors, drugs, ectopic production by tumors, major surgery, pulmonary disease, exogenous ADH. The treatment is water restriction and salt administration. So this is what we have gone through, that is up to concentration and the diluting mechanisms of the kidney. In the next lecture, I'll be taking regarding the different kidney function test and the applied aspects of renal physiology. Thank you.